Bildungsroman that would fit Goethe's work so well, indeed, that the novel became almost coextensive with the genre. There's a lot of discussion among literary critics whether there is any other Bildungsroman but Wilhelm Meister, because that's superb. But we find ideas of Bildung elsewhere in Goethe's work too. While Goethe's Wilhelm Meister ventures forth to learn about his abilities and fate, the 20th century critic Walter Benjamin would focus on another one of Goethe's novels to capture his understanding of Bildung. Goethe's elective affinities feature an extensive plant-filled garden, and this book's protagonists evoke a fate that lies beyond their conscious actions. Thus, Benjamin writes, I quote, "For at the exact moment when Kant's work was completed and a map through the bare woods of reality was sketched, the Goethean quest for the seeds of internal growth began." You see, even his description takes up the image of the seed and the growth. There came the direction of classicism, which sought to grasp not so much the ethical and historical as the mythic and philological. Benjamin thus expands the notion of Bildung beyond the fulfillment of the individual to that of some higher truth. The theological impact of the idea thus continues even beyond the secularization. And the novel's protagonists of the elective affinities, such as Eduard and Ottilie, are precisely not free to express themselves at will. They are definitely not Kantian in that way. They develop feelings or wishes that counteract acceptable social behavior and even contradict all expectations as two married people who remain sexually faithful to each other, conceive a child that does not resemble them, but the lovers whom they desire. And still, Goethe was a hot oven. Even for, this is not part of it. And still, even for Benjamin, Wilhelm Meister proves to be the Bildungsroman's ideal, if only for Meister's constant search for improvement. I quote Benjamin again. By integrating the social process with the development of a person, it bestows the most brittle justification on the order determining the process. The legitimization of this order stands in direct opposition to reality. The untameable is event, precisely as in the Bildungsroman. The Bildungsroman, thus, does not only celebrate Bildung, it may perhaps be the novel par excellence. And as Wilhelm Meister's story continues well into the 19th century, the Bildungsroman may stand perhaps in opposition to realistic expectations, but ever more German citizens wanted to experience it as reality. Germany became a country of Wilhelm Meisters. For the members of the emerging German bourgeoisie, Bildung as self-formation turned into a self-declared key to social success, as well as a means of self-definition. While Mendelssohn described Bildung's potential for the social and political success of individuals, a whole class of citizens were eager now to adopt it. Bildung seemed able to convey confidence and counter aristocratic titles. Instead of castles, the German bourgeois built his bookshelf. He did not only have his portraits painted, he collected pictures and established art galleries. He played music, sponsored opera productions. While he was unable to establish any ancestral lineage, he could recite the poetry of Greece and Rome, and both were older still. Germany's bourgeoisie invented its own feudal tradition via Bildung and backed it up with economic strength. In the 19th century, thus, Bildung became social currency. Many Germans did not simply become bourgeois, but they became members of the Bildungsbürgertum. Bildung, thus adopted by many, ceased to be individualized. Wilhelm Meister was still in search of friends. He did not see himself as a member of a class. But a Bildungsbürger could accept Bildung that was mass-produced and ready-made. For the first time, Bildung was defined by content, and this content was made to be canonical. Every German bourgeois needed to know a smattering of ancient history, a canon of classical texts in Greek and Latin, works by Lessing, Goethe, Schiller. While an English aristocrat went on a grand tour in the 18th century, the German bourgeois of the 19th century traveled via his collection of books. This Bildung was defined as Western and supported by the dominant German culture. By the second half of the 19th century, Bildung was very conservative indeed. Wilhelm von Humboldt played a crucial role in this development of the larger stage of Bildung. He sketched a school reform and helped found a new university in Berlin in 1810. This new institution would become a breeding ground for new ideas, but was also a consequence of the new idea of Bildung. Humboldt did not call for free individuals, no, but for free research at this new institution, and a pursuit of knowledge that was largely independent of government supervision. An apprentice system of professors and students was instituted. This in itself was a revolutionary idea for its day, but it also had great consequences for the concept of learning. Not only plants or human beings were considered to grow and flourish, but knowledge itself, nurtured and encouraged in its path. According to Humboldt, it was knowledge that needed to be emancipated. But knowledge was already well marked, and it was guided by a fixed Bildungsprogramm that would ensure Prussian values and train the member of the new Prussian elite and bureaucracy. Bildung, Humboldt would discover, was something that was good for the Prussian state. One professor at this university, the philosopher Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, wrote about Bildung too. Hegel would not concentrate on the individual or the bourgeois class, but on the Bildung of the spirit. In his phenomenology of spirit, the Bildungsroman perhaps as well, he concentrates this spirit on this spirit's path. Wilhelm Meister would travel south. Hegel's spirit would move from east to west. Self-knowledge here received a firm direction that is declared as that of cultural development. From Meister Eckhart to Mendelssohn, from Goethe to Hegel, Bildung is a concept that thus traveled and developed. First understood within the framework of theology, it moved to define an individual's development, continued to characterize the values of a middle class, and finally called for the preservation of Western culture, always continuing to keep traces of its former meaning as well. Nation. By the 19th century, Germans have become to value Bildung. But if Germans themselves were destined to be formed by Bildung, were they predestined to be formed by it. Bildung may be related to bourgeois achievement and designation, but it was also described in much more general terms. Reaching beyond a specific class, it could also define the German people. The current homepage of the city of Weimar, Goethe's place of residence, describes the town today still as a place of poets and thinkers. No plants, poets and thinkers. And the idea that Germany may be the country of poets and thinkers took root in Weimar first as well. Karl August Museus, who worked there as a court official, a Pagen Hofmeister, as well as a high school teacher, wrote in his physiognomical travels of 1779 that Germany was filled with, I quote, poets and thinkers. This book was published just shortly after Goethe's Wilhelm Meister. Museus used the notion again, and this time in the introduction to his collection of the folk tales of the Germans, Volksmärchen der Deutschen, published in 5 volumes between 1782 and 1786. For Museus, Germans bore an innate seed of poetic and philosophical thought. I quote, "What would the enthusiastic nation of our thinkers, poets, imaginative beings see us be without the happy influence of fantasy and storytelling?" Museus would ask. In the following decades, the properties of imagination and foresight received little attention, but the description as the German people, as a folk of poetry and philosophy, ein Volk der Dichter und Denker, happily endured. It is interesting, of course, that poetry and philosophy are privileged here, just as Bildung has mostly been seen as a humanistic endeavor. There's little attention paid to mathematical literacy or scientific investigation, for example. Museus' description was placed, moreover, within a collection of fairy tales, and this collection had a specific goal in mind. At the time of Museus' publication, the theologian and philosopher Johann Gottfried Herder, a resident of Weimar as well, had called for such a collection of fairy tales and also folk tales, folk songs, and legends. Traded orally, they should serve as examples of the cultural record of the German people. Herder did not look for the production by literary authors or rulers of the land, but by simple folk, by those who may not have been able to read and write, but remembered ancient lore. This was a tradition that should be turned into a new literature, one that would counteract foreign influences, in particularly, of course, French books. These